recognize this. Even in the human ear, that spiral still exists. Okay, here it is, manifested in front of us. So what is it about this mathematically precise spiral that reproduces itself so much in nature? It's amazing. Let's see this is how it comes about. The number represented by the number 1. So I'll show you how mathematically this arrives. If you take a single square and you run a curve for it, in other words, the philosophy behind this is that a small tiny particle of energy, when it is or was created, has no intelligence except for itself. So this tiny little particle, before anything else was invented, let's say the beginning of the universe, for example, the Big Bang, this tiny little particle, the only intelligence it has was itself. So it, because it's the first particle, was represented by the number 1. But now, if the only intelligence it has is itself, then the next step, the only intelligence that it can combine with itself is also itself. And so you get this very interesting situation because you have the number 1 and the number 1, which is like a mirror of itself. So you can almost imagine a little particle in the universe, the only intelligence that it has is itself, which is why you get 1 and 1. But now the intelligence is a little bit cleverer. Because now what does it have? Comparison? 2. How did you get 2? 1 and 1. Itself combined with itself. Does that make sense? Because the only intelligence it has now is itself, but itself and itself now combine to co-create a third. And this third is represented by the number 2. And that is how the spiral shape comes along. I can see you're still not convinced. So these numbers 1, 1, 2 become very powerful. And I won't go into too much detail about it today. I'll talk to you about the business relevance and how nature aspires to understanding these 3 numbers. But these 3 numbers become very, very interesting as we start to understand them. Because the first number 1 represents the past. Okay, because what we're talking about is growth. Nature's growing, plants are growing, the universe is growing, galaxies are being created all the time. Things are always growing. So what we have now is we have 1 representing the past. But because we live in now in the moment, the past is gone, the past is included in the present. So the past and the present are really the same thing, which is why the past and the present represented by the number 1 and 1. So the past plus the present, which is 1 plus 1, gives you a future. Okay, so now we have a very interesting equation. The past plus the present equals the future. Okay, still not convinced, I know. I know you're not convinced. So let's take our human body as well. Human body is a very interesting thing because it's rife with a very strange number, a very obscure sounding number. And this number comes from that same sequence of numbers and it represents the mathematical version or the ratio of the spiral. Let's take, for example, the distance between your shoulder to your elbow. And then take the distance from your elbow to your fingertip. That ratio that's created by the distance between the two is this golden ratio, which is called 1.618. Okay, this very strange, odd-sounding number. Okay, so 1.618. But the interesting thing is this 1.618 ratio appears hundreds, if not thousands of times within the human body. It's all over the place. So we're living, breathing manifestation of this number, which is a manifestation of effectively the same shape as the spiral, which is a manifestation of the same sequence of numbers. And this sequence of numbers comes from a principle. The past plus the present is equal to the future. And what it's effectively saying to us is it's talking about growth. And this is the point that I want to hammer home now. Growth is the most important understanding. We want to grow ourselves. We want to grow our businesses. If we don't know what growth is, how can we grow our business? The human heartbeat. You know that sound? Doof, doof. Doof, doof. The second beat slightly softer than the first, but the second beat is not exactly in the middle of the stronger beats. It's slightly closer to the first beat. Guess what the ratio is between the two sounds that get made? 1.618. Okay, so we get this again. So what is this number? Where does this number come from? The past plus the present equals the future. Let's take this into mathematics again. We have our 1, 1, 2. Okay, so where we are now, the past would be 0. Okay, the present is 1, so the next number is 1. The past is 1, the present is 1, so the future is? The past is 1, the present is 2, so the next number is? The next number would be 5, 8, and so the sequence of numbers continues. Now, you start dividing each number by its previous in the sequence. And you get a very interesting number, 1.618. Okay, now what we're looking at here is a sequence of numbers that represents what I call natural growth. If you can understand natural growth and you can tap into the power of nature, you understand the principles by which things grow, you can literally accomplish anything because you literally grow anything. If you want to achieve something with yourself in the future, you don't just mysteriously appear there. You grow yourself in order to manage to achieve it. Correct? Does that make sense? So what we want to do is we want to take these principles and apply it to our business. And we'll start talking about how you do that, because what we have here is a starting point. Just like a starting point of a relationship, right? And what happens with the relationship? It takes a number of steps, right? And that relationship is grown over a period of time until eventually, at some stage, you reach the point of 1.618, and with each person it's different. And with that 1.618, something amazing happens. They trust you, and they trust you enough to give you information about themselves. They trust you to give you what you've asked them for. So this natural process is about growing relationships. Now, if we can understand how this works and put it into our business, now we're onto a winning wicket. Different people require different levels of trust before they will give you certain information. So, for example, you might trust me immediately if I asked you a question and you would answer that question. You might take a lot more. I need to grow the relationship more before you get there. So, in actual fact, this 1.618 can be anywhere. The point is, you only know where it is when you decide what you want it to be. And in business, the 1.618, when it comes to relationships, is that point at which an individual tells you the information about themselves that you've asked for. Because when they have told you, they have answered questions about themselves, when they've told you what you need, like a doctor, you can take that information, diagnose it, and say, you know what, you need this, this, and this product. This is how much it's going to cost. When can we start? So you're effectively providing them with something that they've already asked for. That's natural. But we'll get into that in a few minutes. Okay, more proof. The same way that the human hand, bones in your hand work, the same ratio exists. Here's the number of the sequence. 2, 3, 5, 8. Everyone recognize that? That's actually I think it's a nebula. When you look at this shape out in space, what do you see? What image comes to mind? A heart, yeah? A heart? A brain, yeah? Anyone else? Does this look like something growing in here, like a head? Fetus in a womb. It's interesting. Yeah, that's what I saw in it. And it inspired me to do a little checking up. So I found a photo and I actually took an egg, because it's exactly the same shape as an egg. The womb and an egg are the same shape. It's this egg-shaped embryo, which is quite nice because you can almost look at it as a birth of life, or the birth of a relationship, or the birth of a business. The same thing, really. But what's very interesting about this is I decided, hang on a second, this little fat part over here is a little bit different, is a little bit higher than the middle. And I measured them. I took out an egg from the fridge and I measured it. And I measured it on this and guess what number it came up with? Isn't that amazing, huh? So he started to get this really interesting, and I started to become excited. And then the final thing arrived for me, was to put the icing on the cake, and the nail in the coffin, whatever you want to say. And that is, I got this photo a couple of weeks ago from a good friend of mine, Richard Wade. He got it from the laboratories at CERN. And basically what this shows is at the smallest quantum physics level, where they do all these quantum physics experiments. Don't ask me specifically what they've done here. It's to do with shooting protons at each other or something and then watching the results. This is a pattern that it made. See this? So at the smallest quantum particle level, to a galaxy with 100, if not 400 billion stars in it, we have these same shapes. Someone's trying to tell us something. And I think for me, what they're telling us is that we need to understand how things grow. If we can understand how things grow and how nature grows things, then we can literally achieve anything that our infinite universe can offer us. So, is it fair to say that we're all connected? Okay. So another thing, I went to a thesaurus, and what I did was I saw in the English language how many other words mean the same thing as connected. I was astonished. Here's a few of them.